Hi there, I'm Taz Thornton. I'm an author, I'm a coach, I'm a speaker. You might have seen me popping up on TV, or I'm fairly often on radio too. When DIVA asked me if I'd take part in this Lesbian Visibility Week project, I was over the moon. But I also wondered how on earth I'd pitch this, because for me, visibility is a little bit different. You see, my wife Asha and I moved away from the southeast. Cool, it's got to be nearly 20 years ago now. When we lived in Kent, we would fairly regularly pop over to Brighton after work and sock up the vibe there, or we'd go over to London and we'd go out onto the scene there, back in the days where Candy Bar still existed in its original form. But when we moved over to the Lincolnshire Flatlands, over to the Fens, life started to feel a little bit different, because there isn't a scene here as such. Well, there's probably more of one now if we go out towards Lincoln or Peterborough. But when we moved here, the most excited we could get in the evenings was going over for the late night of shopping in Peterborough, which was 8 o'clock once a week. Now, given that we'd moved over from Kent, where we could pop over to Bluewater in 5 minutes or Lakeside in 10 minutes, or hop on a train and be right in the middle of banging Soho fairly quickly, it was a bit of a sea change. But I've got to say, the biggest issue in moving here wasn't anything to do with being out and lesbian visibility. The biggest issue was having to remember people's birthdays in time to order something from Amazon instead of being able to pop to the shops in a rush after work. Visibility is different here. It really is. But by and large, people have been really, really accepting. So, while Asha and I have loved being on the scene in our past, we've been together for 22 years nearly now. We've enjoyed being out on the scene as much as the next person. We'd have nothing against going out onto the scene now. We've been to the Pride marches and the Mardi Gras, and we've blown our whistles, and we were there marching against Section 28 back in the day. Now life is a bit more level. A bit like the land here. It's very, very flat where we live. You can see for miles, and that means we have the most amazing sunrises and glorious sunsets, better than anywhere in the world. I might be a bit biased, not bi, I'm gay, but for me, this feels like home. I love it here. But here's where we get back onto visibility a little bit. You see, I don't have short hair now to look more lesbian. When I first moved here, I still had my natural blonde hair, and it was long. Remember what I said about the Flatlands? The reason I had my hair cut is because I got out of the car after work one day, and the wind cut across the fens and started flailing about, and I looked like Helen Hunt in the middle of a clip from Twister. Hair's got to go. I don't have bright pink hair because I want to look like a big gay candy floss. I have bright pink hair because I want to be absolutely, unequivocally, unapologetically me. And that's how it is. But the difference here is we don't feel the need to wave rainbow flags here or say, hey, look at us, we're gay. Everybody here has been so accepting, and of course there have been a few blips, but you get blips wherever you go, don't you? When we first moved over here to Lincolnshire, we moved onto a new housing development. And though it hadn't been planned that way, it was like a big gay paradise. We had another lesbian couple across the road. There were a couple of gay guys up the street, and there were another couple just a few houses away. I'm not sure the locals knew what had hit them. But still, there wasn't an issue. There were tiny issues. I remember one of the local posties once complained to somebody at the other side of the village about the influx of gays from the city and how terrible it was. And I wondered how that would go down. I wondered if the villagers would side with the attitudes of the postie, who'd also made some really disparaging comments about a trans guy in the village as well. And in fact, that villager reported him to Royal Mail, and that postie got his wrist slapped. And that for me was a real turning point, this recognition that actually we were a long way away from the city, and yet we had acceptance because, well, we were just normal human beings, really. I had a couple of issues at work, although I didn't recognise them as issues at the time, because we're talking, 10, 15, 20 years ago when these things were happening. It was far more commonplace then. There was an issue where My then boss said he'd told head office they didn't need to worry about maternity leave, obviously. Really? Everything still works, dude. Everything still works. And there were a couple of guys on a couple of occasions who grabbed me and tried to give me a big French kiss, because obviously I still needed a man. That went down well. And there was the time, actually fairly recently, when my wife and I were walking through Peterborough and chanced holding hands for a couple of seconds, only to end up being followed by a couple of women quoting scripture at us. But not once have we thought that we had to go into hiding where we are now. Now, the reason I'm talking so much about this is that we need to have a real clear think about what we as a lesbian, gay, LGBTQIA community expect from one another. Not too long back, I was at a lesbian gathering in London, and I got chatting to someone afterwards, and the first question they asked me was, so what's your brand of activism? I thought, hold on a minute, what's my brand of activism? I'm gay, I live in Lincolnshire, and I don't hide. That's activism enough. You see, you don't have pride marches and stuff out here. I mean, there will be if you're going to Peterborough and into Lincoln, but here, where there's, you know, houses, one school, one village hall, and one little shop that used to be a petrol station as well, it doesn't matter. People are kind of accepted for being who they are, if they're real, honest, salt of the earth people. We're all in isolation at the moment, of course, and my wife and I are technically on the vulnerable list, so this is our 5th week in isolation, and our neighbours have been amazing at asking if there's anything we need them to fetch for us or get from the shops. There's never been a hint of, only if you denounce being a lesbian, we'll get you some pasta. There's never been any of that. But I have no doubt that if we started to really stir things up in a small farming community, there might be a bit of a different attitude, because here we don't need to. We're accepted for who we are, and that's what it means. So when someone asks me, what's my brand of activism? It's being true to me. And I think that's really, really important in Lesbian Visibility Week, that we all get real clear about what we expect from other people in our community, because for those people living outside of the cities, outside of some of those more suburban areas, for those of us living, you know, amongst meadows and fields of sheep and cows, visibility might mean a different thing. Visibility, for me, is being true to who I am. Not having to hide, but not screaming, hey, I'm gay, from the rooftops either, because it's a tiny part of who I am. It doesn't define me. You know, someone in my old corporate life once described me as about as alternative as you can get. And I had normal coloured hair then. I might have had some red streaks in it, but normal-ish. Whatever normal is. And that was because I'm gay, and because I follow what she saw as quite an unorthodox spiritual path. I follow shamanism and the medicine path. And she saw that as being really alternative. I see that as just being me. And I think when it comes to visibility, what's important is that we all are able to be as out as we want to be. And I'm really out. I just don't make a big deal out of the fact that I happen to love a woman. I'm really out. I'm really me in all ways. And I think we need to be really careful about that. It's very easy when we get onto social media, we start reading magazines and looking at TV and looking at the websites. It's easy to be sucked into that kind of political mode. It's easy to become a political dyke, and I can really be one at times, I promise you, but to expect everybody else to be the same. But it's really different according to who you're surrounded with, who you're surrounded by, rather, where you live, what your community is like. So visibility for me means just being true to me. It means my wife and I being able to be accepted as members of the community. We might not walk down the street holding hands, but not many people who are heterosexual do that here either. It doesn't mean we're actively thinking we can't. We need to remember that for some people, just being out and being themselves is enough. When it comes to that, to standing up for people's right to be themselves, to love who they choose, obviously if it's consenting adults and it's legal to be able to practice the spirituality they choose, to be able to be out to the degree that they choose, that's what's important. And that's not activism. That for me is just not being an asshole. So we've got to be careful with what we mean when we say activism and visibility. We've got to make sure that everybody has the right to choose, everybody has the right to be accepted and respected for who they are. That's where I stand. Hope some of you will join me. Thank you.